I'm holding a folded blanket between my hands, running my thumb along its edge where the fabric has begun to fray. The afternoon light filters through the blinds in thin golden strips, casting everything in my bedroom in a soft, drowsy haze. The blanket smells like cedar and that particular scent of laundry detergent that Clara always uses, something floral and clean that reminds me of Saturday mornings and the sound of the washing machine humming downstairs. Owen lies across from me on top of the comforter, his shoes kicked off carelessly beside the bed. One sock has a hole near the big toe. He told me he just needed a quick nap before driving back to his temporary place across town. Said it with that half-smile of his that makes something tight unfurl in my chest. His eyes are already heavy with sleep, and I can see the exhaustion settling into the lines around them. He's been staying with us for 2 weeks now, and I've memorized these small details without meaning to. The house feels suspended in this moment. Clara is at the library until evening, the kids are with friends, and the only sounds are the steady whir of the ceiling fan above us and Owen's breathing as it begins to deepen and slow. I should get up. I should fold this blanket properly and put it back in the linen closet where it belongs. I should check my emails or start dinner or do any of the 100 small tasks that fill my days and keep my mind occupied. Instead, I remain sitting on the edge of my bed, watching Owen's face relax into sleep. There's something peaceful about him like this, something that makes the constant hum of anxiety in my chest quiet for once. I tell myself this is normal. People nap in other people's bedrooms all the time. Cousins-in-law collapse on beds when they're tired. It's just kindness, just exhaustion, just the ordinary intimacy of family. But my hands are trembling slightly as I hold this blanket, and I know it's not ordinary at all. Owen shifts in his sleep, turning toward me, and his arm falls across my waist before I can move away. The weight of it is warm and solid and completely unexpected. My breath catches in my throat. I freeze, afraid that any movement might wake him, might break whatever spell has settled over this quiet afternoon. His face is inches from my shoulder now, and I can feel the soft rhythm of his breathing against my shirt. I lie back slowly, carefully, until my head meets the pillow beside his. The ceiling fan turns in lazy circles above us, its shadows sweeping across the walls in endless repetition. I watch it spin and try to convince myself that this means nothing, but something deep inside me is finally, terrifyingly awake. This is what I've been waiting for without knowing I was waiting. This closeness that has no name, this tenderness that I've never allowed myself to imagine. It feels like a secret I'm keeping from myself, like a betrayal of everything I've built, like a promise of something I'm too afraid to want. Owen's arm tightens slightly around my waist in his sleep, and I close my eyes, letting myself feel the weight of another man holding me for the first time in my 42 years of careful, practiced life. The neighborhood where I've lived for 18 years stretches out in neat rows of pale vinyl siding and carefully trimmed hedges. Every lawn is cut to regulation height. Every driveway swept clean of leaves. The mailboxes stand at identical heights, painted in approved shades of black or dark green. Mrs. Patterson across the street still waves from her kitchen window every morning at 7:15 as I back out of the driveway. The Kowalskis next door rake their leaves the moment they fall, as if autumn itself is an inconvenience to be managed. From the outside, my life must look as orderly as the street itself. A steady job managing insurance claims downtown, a mortgage paid on time every month for the past decade and a half, 2 cars in the driveway that get washed every other Sunday without fail. The kind of life that looks successful in Christmas card photographs, the kind that makes other people nod approvingly when Clara mentions my promotion or the kids' grades at neighborhood barbecues. My house smells like the dinners I cook without thinking. The same rotation of chicken and vegetables on Monday, pasta with Jared sauce on Tuesday, leftover whatever on Wednesday. The kitchen timer has become the soundtrack of my evenings, beeping to remind me when to flip, when to stir, when to call everyone to the table. Clara's lavender candles burn in the living room most evenings, their flames reflecting off the television screen, mixing with the faint mustiness of old carpet that we keep meaning to replace but never quite get around to. The walls are lined with photographs spanning 2 decades, birthday parties where everyone's smile looks practiced, family vacations to beaches and theme parks that blur together in my memory like scenes from someone else's life. There's the trip to Disney World when Sarah was 8, all of us exhausted and sunburned, but grinning for the camera. The cabin in the Smokies 3 summers ago, where Michael caught his first fish and Clara read mystery novels on the porch, while I pretended to enjoy the enforced togetherness of family vacation. I wake up at 5:30 every morning and read the newspaper with my coffee, the same routine I've followed since my late 20s. The house is quiet at that hour, wrapped in the particular silence of suburban dawn. No traffic yet, just the distant hum of air conditioners and the occasional bark of someone's dog. I sit at the kitchen table watching the sunrise through windows that Clara keeps spotless, reading about other people's disasters and calculating the premiums they'll pay for the privilege of my professional sympathy. The coffee maker gurgles through its cycle while I scan the headlines, the obituaries, the sports scores that mean nothing to me but fill the time between waking and leaving for work. Clara appears around 6:15, her hair already brushed and pinned, moving through the kitchen in the efficient dance we've perfected over the years. She makes her own coffee, stronger than mine, and takes it upstairs while I finish reading about car accidents and house fires and lives upended by the kind of chaos I help people quantify and move past. She works part-time at the library, a job she took when the kids were small and never gave up even after they outgrew their need for her constant presence. She says she likes the quiet, the orderliness of books returned to their proper places, the way patrons whisper automatically even when there's no rule requiring it. I understand that need for order, that comfort in predictable patterns. We've built our entire marriage on it. Our children are nearly grown now. Sarah is finishing her junior year at State, studying something with computers that I pretend to understand when she calls home. Michael graduates high school in the spring and talks about community college with the resigned tone of someone checking items off a list rather than pursuing dreams. The dinner table feels too large most nights with just Clara and me sitting across from each other, making conversation about her day reshelving returned books or my cases involving wind damage and water claims. We've become experts at filling silence with small talk, at moving around each other in the kitchen without touching, at sharing a bed while carefully maintaining our separate sides, two people sleeping in parallel lines that never quite intersect. I mow the lawn every Saturday morning before 9, before the heat becomes unbearable and the grass starts to wilt under the summer sun. The mower is a ritual I've come to appreciate, the steady back and forth pattern, the clean lines it leaves behind, the way it drowns out thought for an hour or two. The neighbors wave from their own yards where they're watering flowers or washing cars or performing their own weekend maintenance rituals. We exchange the same pleasantries we've been trading for years, conversations worn smooth as river stones. How about this weather? Kids keeping you busy. Time for vacation yet? Tom from 2 houses down always stops to chat about property taxes or the high school football team's prospects this season. Mrs. Chun brings me tomatoes from her garden and asks about Clara's book club. I've perfected the art of these conversations, the way you perfect any skill through repetition. I smile at the right moments, laugh at their jokes, ask about their families with just enough interest to seem neighborly, but not enough to invite deeper connection. They know me as the insurance man with the neat lawn and the quiet wife, the father whose kids turned out well despite the divorce rates and drug problems that seem to touch every other family on the street. But in the spaces between these routines, in the quiet moments when I'm alone with my thoughts, something else stirs. At the gym on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, my eyes follow certain men longer than they should, watching the way they move through their workouts, the casual intimacy of their conversations by the water fountain, the unconscious grace of bodies that seem comfortable in their own skin. I tell myself I'm simply observing, simply curious about their easy camaraderie, the way they clap each other on the shoulder or share jokes that make them throw their heads back in laughter. During late-night cable movies, when Clara has taken her cup of chamomile tea and gone to bed with whatever library book she's working through this week, I find myself alone with the remote control and a dangerous kind of solitude. I flip through channels and linger on scenes that make my chest tight with something I refuse to name. Men embracing in ways that seem to mean more than friendship. Characters whose glances hold the weight of unspoken longing. I tell myself I'm simply tired, that my mind is wandering, that anyone might pause on these moments out of idle curiosity. But the truth settles heavier in the dark living room, lit only by the television's glow. Sometimes I think about college, about my roommate David, and the way the air in our dorm room seemed to thicken during those late September nights when the building's ancient air conditioning couldn't keep up with the humid Michigan heat. He used to sleep in nothing but boxers, his lean body sprawled across sheets that never quite stayed tucked, and I would lie awake in my own narrow bed pretending to study while stealing glances at the rise and fall of his chest. I remember the electricity I felt when our shoulders brushed as we hunched over the same economics textbook, sharing the single desk lamp that cast everything in warm yellow light. The way my heart hammered when he'd stretch and yawn during our late-night cramming sessions, his shirt riding up to expose the soft skin of his stomach, that vulnerable strip of flesh just above his belt line. The morning he woke up early and caught me watching him sleep, how quickly I looked away, how he smiled and said good morning like nothing had happened, like he hadn't noticed the hunger in my gaze. Nothing ever happened between us. Nothing was ever said. But sometimes, in the dark hours before dawn when Clara sleeps beside me and the house settles into its deepest quiet, I wonder what might have been different if I'd been brave enough to reach across the space between our beds just once. If I'd had the courage to let my hand find his shoulder, to speak the words that lived behind my teeth like prisoners waiting for release. David transferred to a school in California after sophomore year, and we lost touch the way college friends do when distance and different lives pull them apart. But I still dream about him sometimes, dreams that leave me awake and restless and ashamed of the longing that apparently never learned to die. This is the life I built for safety, brick by careful brick, decision by deliberate decision. A wife who loves me in the gentle, expected way that good marriages are supposed to unfold, with shared responsibilities and coordinated calendars, and the kind of steady affection that looks like contentment from the outside. Children who call on Sundays and send cards on Father's Day, who've grown into decent young adults despite my constant fear that they might somehow inherit whatever brokenness I've spent decades trying to bury. A career that pays the bills and requires nothing more of me than competence and punctuality, where I can lose myself in the mathematics of other people's disasters and pretend that solving their problems somehow solves my own. I chose this life because it was the right thing to do, because it was what was expected of men like me in neighborhoods like this, because it was easier than facing whatever truth was clawing at the edges of my consciousness like something wild trying to escape from a cage. I chose it because the alternative felt impossible, not just difficult or unconventional, but literally impossible, like trying to breathe underwater or fly without wings. But safety, I'm beginning to understand, has its own particular kind of loneliness. It's the loneliness of being known without being seen, of being loved for the person you've decided to be rather than the person you actually are. It settles into your bones gradually, so slowly that you don't notice it until you wake up one morning and realize you've been holding your breath for 20 years, waiting for permission to exhale that will never come because you've never been brave enough to ask for it. The silence in my house isn't peaceful. It's expectant, like the pause between lightning and thunder, waiting for something to break it open. Clara hums while she does the dishes. The kids text instead of calling. The neighbors wave from their perfect yards, and I move through it all feeling like a ghost haunting his own life. And as Owen's breathing deepens beside me on this quiet afternoon, his arms still draped across my waist with an intimacy that feels both foreign and achingly familiar, I'm beginning to understand that the breaking has already begun. The careful walls I've spent decades building are starting to crack, and for the first time in my adult life, I'm not sure I want to repair them. Clara brings it up over dinner on a Tuesday evening in late September, setting down her fork and looking at me with that particular expression she gets when she's already made a decision but wants it to sound like a discussion. Her cousin Owen has separated from his partner of 7 years, she tells me, and he needs somewhere to stay while he looks for an apartment. Just for a few weeks, maybe a month at most. The guest room is empty anyway, and he's family. I nod and say, of course, because what else would I say? Clara's family has always been important to her, more important than mine has ever been to me. Her cousins call on birthdays, remember anniversaries, show up for holiday dinners with casseroles and stories, and the kind of easy intimacy I've never quite understood. Owen is her favorite, she explains, her mother's sister's youngest boy, though he's 38 now and hardly a boy anymore. He works in graphic design and has always been what she calls sensitive, which I understand to mean something more than just artistic temperament. He arrives on a Saturday afternoon with 2 suitcases and a box of books that he apologizes for immediately. Clara hugs him at the front door with genuine warmth, and I shake his hand in the awkward way men do when they're not sure how much physical contact is appropriate. His grip is firm but brief, his smile soft around the edges in a way that suggests recent sadness carefully tucked away for the sake of politeness. Owen is shorter than me by a few inches, with dark hair that needs cutting and eyes the color of coffee with too much cream stirred in. He wears clothes that fit properly but look comfortable rather than expensive, jeans that have been washed many times, a sweater with a small hole near the left elbow that he doesn't seem to notice or care about. There's something unhurried about the way he moves, as though he's learned to be patient with the world's tendency to disappoint. That first dinner feels different from the thousands Clara and I have shared over the years. Owen asks questions that require more than yes or no answers, listens to Clara's stories about difficult patrons at the library, and laughs in a way that makes her light up, like she's remembering some version of herself I haven't seen in years. He asks about my work too, but not in the polite, obligatory way most people do. He seems genuinely curious about what it's like to spend your days calculating other people's losses, to put dollar amounts on the things that can't really be replaced. The air in the dining room feels charged somehow, though I can't pinpoint why. Maybe it's just the novelty of having another adult voice at the table, someone whose presence requires us to perform the roles of host and hostess instead of simply existing in our usual comfortable silence. Clara opens a bottle of wine, something she rarely does on weeknights, and the conversation stretches longer than usual, past the time when we normally retreat to our separate evening routines. Over the following days, Owen settles into the rhythms of our house with surprising ease. He's an early riser like me, and I find him in the kitchen at 6 in the morning, already dressed and reading something on his phone while his coffee cools in a mug Clara must have given him. He nods good morning and asks if I mind the company, gestures to the chair across from me at the table where I've been eating breakfast alone for years. I tell him I don't mind, and discover that I actually mean it. There's something peaceful about his presence, the way he doesn't feel the need to fill every silence with conversation, but doesn't make the quiet feel heavy either. He reads while I work through the newspaper, occasionally sharing something he's found interesting, an article about urban planning, a review of a movie neither of us will probably see, small observations that reveal the way his mind works. He lingers in the kitchen while I make my second cup of coffee, leaning against the counter in a way that suggests he is nowhere urgent to be. We talk about small things, the weather, the neighborhood, his job search, my plans for the weekend. Nothing profound, but something about these conversations feels different from the ones I have with neighbors or coworkers. He listens with his whole attention, asks follow-up questions that indicate he's actually thinking about what I'm saying rather than just waiting for his turn to talk. Evenings become different too. After dinner, Owen joins me on the back porch where I've been sneaking cigarettes for the past 5 years, a habit Clara pretends not to know about, and I pretend not to be ashamed of. He doesn't smoke, but doesn't seem to mind the smell, just sits in the other wicker chair and watches the sky fade from blue to purple to black while we talk about whatever comes to mind. These conversations stretch longer each night, touching on subjects I rarely discuss with anyone, books we've both read, places we'd like to travel, the strange ways childhood shapes us long after we think we've outgrown it. Owen mentions his ex-partner only once, briefly, saying it was one of those relationships that died slowly rather than ending with any dramatic revelation. I understand this. The way love can simply exhaust itself like a battery running down, leaving two people who care about each other with nothing left to sustain the daily work of being together. On weekends, when Clara is busy with errands or her book club meetings, Owen and I take walks through the neighborhood. Not planned expeditions, just casual strolls that happen when we both need air and movement. We follow the same routes I've walked alone for years, but his presence makes me notice things I've stopped seeing. The way Mrs. Patterson's rose bushes are starting to lose their blooms, the crack in the sidewalk outside the Kowalski's house that's been growing wider all summer, the quality of light filtering through the old oak trees as autumn begins to assert itself. Nothing explicit is said during these walks, but I find myself paying attention to small details about him. The way he points out a hawk circling overhead, the careful way he steps around puddles, the unconscious grace of his movements. There's something about being beside him that makes the familiar streets feel less like a maze of obligations and more like a place where interesting things might actually happen. 3 weeks into his stay, it happens. Clara has gone to bed early with a headache, and Owen and I are sitting in the living room watching some forgettable movie on cable. He's stretched out in the recliner. I'm on the couch, and the only light comes from the television screen flickering against the walls. When the movie ends, he stretches and yawns and says he should probably head upstairs to the guest room. But then he looks at my bedroom door and grins. "Mind if I just crash here for a few minutes?" he asks, already moving toward my bed. "The guest room mattress is too soft," he explains, makes his back ache. "Just a quick nap before I make the trek upstairs." He collapses onto my comforter fully clothed, kicks off his shoes, and closes his eyes with a sigh of contentment. It feels like nothing, like everything, like the most natural thing in the world, and also like stepping off a cliff into empty air. I sit on the edge of the bed, telling myself this is perfectly normal, that people nap in other people's bedrooms all the time. But my hands are shaking slightly as I reach for the folded blanket at the foot of the bed, and I know with absolute certainty that something has shifted, that the ordinary has just slipped into the extraordinary with the smallest possible gesture. The ceiling fan turns slowly above us, and I watch Owen's face relax into sleep, wondering how something so simple can feel so much like the beginning of the end of everything I thought I knew about my own life. After that first afternoon when Owen falls asleep on my bed, something fundamental shifts in the architecture of my days. The routines I've followed for decades, the early morning coffee, the evening news, the Saturday lawn maintenance, suddenly feel less like obligations and more like opportunities. Not because the tasks themselves have changed, but because Owen's presence has altered the texture of time itself. I find myself looking forward to 6 in the morning, when I know he'll appear in the kitchen doorway with his hair still messy from sleep, reaching for the coffee mug Clara designated as his without having to ask where things are kept. These morning conversations stretch longer each day, neither of us seeming particularly eager to start our respective routines. He tells me about the freelance projects he's working on while he searches for something more permanent, describes the clients who want their logos to convey trustworthiness and innovation simultaneously, as though graphic design were a form of magic that could solve the fundamental contradictions of commerce. I tell him about the insurance claims that cross my desk, not the details, which would violate confidentiality, but the strange patterns I've noticed over the years. How people always underestimate the value of photographs until they're gone. How house fires happen more often on Sundays than any other day of the week. How everyone thinks they understand risk until they're forced to calculate their own. These conversations have weight to them, substance that my daily interactions with Clara somehow lack. Not because Clara isn't intelligent or interesting, but because with her I'm always performing the role of husband, father, provider. With Owen, I'm simply talking to another person who seems genuinely curious about how my mind works. The evenings become the part of each day I anticipate most. After dinner, Owen and I drift naturally toward the back porch, where the conversations from morning continue and deepen. He talks about his relationship with David, his ex-partner, not my college roommate, though the coincidence of names doesn't escape me, with a frankness that both surprises and moves me. 7 years, he says, looking out at the darkening sky. 7 years of trying to make something work that maybe was never meant to work in the first place. He describes the gradual erosion of intimacy, the way they slowly became roommates who happened to share a bed but no longer shared much else. The fights about money and housework that were never really about money or housework. The counseling sessions where they sat on opposite ends of a beige couch and tried to explain to a stranger what they could no longer explain to each other. I find myself listening with an intensity that surprises me, not just to the words but to the spaces between them. The way his voice catches slightly when he mentions waking up one morning and realizing he felt more lonely lying next to David than he did sleeping alone. Something tender stirs in my chest as he talks. Equal parts empathy and something hungrier, more dangerous, that I'm not ready to name. Owen asks about my marriage too, not directly, but in the gentle way someone might approach a sleeping animal they're not sure is friendly. He notices things, the way Clara and I move around each other in the kitchen without touching, the polite distance we maintain even when we're sitting on the same couch. I find myself admitting things I've never said aloud, about the loneliness of being married to someone who loves the idea of you more than the reality, about the exhaustion of pretending contentment for so many years that you almost forget you're pretending. These conversations stretch past midnight sometimes, long after Clara has taken her chamomile tea and gone to bed with whatever mystery novel she's working through. Owen and I sit in the darkness of the living room with only the television providing light, talking about the ways people learn to settle for less than they imagined for themselves, about the difference between safety and happiness, about the strange cruelty of getting exactly what you thought you wanted. Small details become monumental during these weeks. The way Owen's hand brushes mine when we both reach for the remote control. The warmth of his laughter when I make some dry observation about the neighbors or the characters in whatever movie we're half watching. The particular quality of stillness that settles over us during those long pauses in conversation, when we're both thinking about things we're not quite ready to say. I start paying attention to his physical presence in ways that feel both natural and forbidden. The way he stretches in the morning, arms above his head, shirt riding up to reveal a strip of pale skin above his jeans. The unconscious grace with which he moves through my house, as though he belongs here more completely than I do sometimes. The way he looks at me when he thinks I'm not paying attention, not studying me, exactly, but taking me in with a kind of gentle curiosity that makes my chest tight with something I'm still not brave enough to examine too closely. I catch myself replaying moments from our conversations, searching for meanings that might exist only in my imagination. The way he said he'd never felt as comfortable anywhere as he does here, in my kitchen, on my porch, in the strange sanctuary we've created out of these evening talks. The way he looked at me when I admitted that I sometimes feel like I'm living someone else's life, wearing someone else's clothes, following someone else's script for what a man like me is supposed to want. It feels both terrifying and inevitable, this awakening that seems to be happening beneath the surface of ordinary days. As though Owen has walked into my carefully constructed life, and simply by being himself, honest, present, unafraid of silence or difficult truths, has awakened some part of me that has been dormant for decades. For the first time since college, since those nights lying awake in my narrow dorm bed stealing glances at David's sleeping form, I allow myself to imagine what it might feel like to be truly seen by another person. Not loved for my utility or admired for my reliability, but seen in all my complications and contradictions and somehow accepted anyway. The thought should frighten me more than it does. Instead, as October settles over our quiet neighborhood, and Owen shows no signs of finding an apartment he likes well enough to leave, I find myself hoping that whatever is building between us in these stolen moments will continue to build, slowly and carefully, like something precious being assembled by hand in the darkness. It happens on a Thursday afternoon in mid-October, when the maple trees have turned the color of burnt amber and the air carries that particular chill that means winter is no longer a distant possibility. Clara is working a double shift at the library, some community event that requires her to stay late and help with setup. And Owen and I find ourselves with an afternoon that stretches ahead of us like an open road. We decide to walk farther than usual, beyond the familiar boundaries of my neighborhood into the older section of town where the houses are larger and set back from the street behind gates of wrought iron and overgrown hedges. Owen points out architectural details I've never noticed. The way a particular style of window trim indicates a house was built in the 1920s, the difference between original stonework and later additions that try too hard to match. The conversation drifts from houses to the people who lived in them, to the way neighborhoods change over decades, to the strange persistence of certain kinds of beauty even as everything else shifts and evolves. Owen has a way of seeing patterns that I miss, connections between seemingly unrelated things that become obvious once he points them out. Walking beside him, I feel like I'm discovering my own town for the first time. We cover more ground than either of us intended, following sidewalks that wind through streets I recognize but have never really explored. The afternoon light grows golden and thick, the way it does in autumn when the sun hangs lower in the sky and seems to move more slowly across it. By the time we loop back toward home, we've been walking for nearly 2 hours, and I can feel the pleasant ache in my legs that comes from using muscles that have grown accustomed to more sedentary days. Owen stretches as we climb the front steps, working out the kinks in his shoulders with the unself-conscious ease of someone comfortable in his own body. Inside, the house feels particularly quiet after the ambient sounds of our walk. No traffic noise, no voices of children playing in distant yards, just the familiar hum of the refrigerator and the whisper of air moving through the heating vents that have recently kicked on for the season. I pour glasses of water for both of us, and we stand in the kitchen drinking them without talking, still caught in the peaceful exhaustion that follows a long walk in good company. Owen kicks off his shoes and flexes his feet, mentions that he probably should have worn different socks, something about a blister forming on his heel. The domesticity of the moment strikes me. Two people sharing the comfortable aftermath of exercise, solving small problems together, existing in the same space without needing to perform anything for each other. That's when he does it again, the thing that has become both ordinary and extraordinary over the past weeks. He wanders toward my bedroom, glass still in hand, and collapses onto my comforter with a theatrical sigh. God, this bed is so much more comfortable than that guest room mattress, he says, though by now we both know this isn't really about the mattress. Clara bought it from some expensive store downtown, one of those places where they let you lie on different beds for as long as you want while a salesperson hovers nearby, pretending not to watch. I tell him this, and he laughs, settling deeper into the pillows. Just a quick nap before dinner, he says, the same words he's used the other times, though we both know that dinner is still hours away and Clara won't be home until evening. His eyes are already heavy, not from tiredness exactly, but from the kind of contentment that makes sleep seem like the most natural thing in the world. I sit on the edge of the bed, still holding my own water glass, watching as his breathing begins to deepen. The afternoon light filtering through the blinds has that particular autumn quality, cooler and more golden than summer light, casting everything in soft focus. The house settles around us with small creaks and sighs, the way old houses do when they're adjusting to changes in temperature. This time, I don't resist. When Owen shifts in his sleep and turns toward me, when his arm falls across my waist in that gesture that has become achingly familiar, I don't freeze. Instead, I set my water glass on the nightstand and lie back slowly, carefully, until my head meets the pillow beside his. The ceiling fan turns in its endless circles above us, but I'm not watching it anymore. I'm watching Owen's face, the way sleep has softened the lines around his eyes, the particular vulnerability that settles over someone when they're completely unguarded. His arm is warm and solid across my waist, heavier than I expected, more real than anything I've felt in decades. For the first time in my 42 years of careful, constructed life, I allow myself to feel what it's like to be held by another man. Not the quick, performative embraces that happen at weddings or funerals, not the brief contact of handshakes or shoulder pats, But this, sustained, intimate, the weight of another person choosing to rest against me as though I'm safe, as though I'm home. The sensation moves through me in waves. First, a sharp intake of breath that I have to control so I don't wake him. Then something deeper, a loosening in my chest that I didn't realize I'd been holding clenched for years. It's not sexual, exactly, though there's something undeniably sensual about it. The warmth of his body through 2 layers of clothing, the slight rise and fall of his chest against my side, the way his fingers have curled loosely against my ribs. It's recognition. That's the word that comes to me as I lie there, trying not to move, trying not to breathe too deeply, trying not to do anything that might disturb this perfect, impossible moment. Recognition of something I've been searching for without knowing I was searching, something I've been hungry for without understanding the nature of my own hunger. This is what I was afraid of in college, what I've been running from in my marriage, what I've been denying every time I caught myself looking too long at certain men or lingering too long on certain scenes in late-night movies. Not just attraction, though that's part of it, but this deeper need for connection, for the kind of intimacy that doesn't require explanation or justification, that simply is. Minutes pass, maybe an hour. I lose track of time completely, suspended in this strange state between waking and sleeping where the boundaries of ordinary experience seem more negotiable. Owen's breathing is steady and deep beside me, but I remain completely alert, as though some part of me is afraid that if I fall asleep, I'll wake up and discover this was all a dream. When Owen finally stirs, he doesn't pull his arm away immediately. Instead, he seems to become gradually aware of where he is, of the position we're in, of the way the light in the room has shifted to indicate the approach of evening. His eyes open slowly, and when they focus on me, there's no surprise in them, no awkwardness or confusion. For a moment that feels both infinite and instantaneous, we simply look at each other. His arm is still across my waist, my head is still on the pillow beside his, and neither of us moves to change this. The air in the room seems to thicken with something unspoken, something that has been building for weeks and has finally found this quiet moment to emerge. I want to say something, but words feel inadequate, clumsy instruments for what is passing between us. Owen's eyes are the color of coffee with cream, I notice, though I've been looking into them for weeks without really seeing them. There are small flecks of gold near the pupils, and lines at the corners that suggest he smiles more often than he frowns. He doesn't say anything either, but something in his expression shifts, a kind of gentle acknowledgement that we have crossed some invisible line together, that this moment will not be forgotten or dismissed as accidental. His fingers move slightly against my ribs, not quite a caress, but more intentional than the unconscious contact of sleep. The moment stretches between us like a bridge we're both afraid to cross completely, but unwilling to abandon. Then, slowly, carefully, as though he's handling something fragile, Owen lifts his arm from my waist and sits up. The loss of his weight against me feels profound, like waking up from the most vivid dream of my life to find the ordinary world waiting with all its limitations and expectations. We don't speak of what has happened, but we both know something irreversible has passed between us. As I watch Owen stretch and run his hands through his hair, as he smiles at me with that gentle, knowing expression, I understand that I am no longer the same person who woke up this morning. I carry that moment like a secret flame for the rest of the evening. Through dinner preparation and small talk and the normal rhythms of household life, when Clara returns home tired but cheerful from her library event. But the flame doesn't go out. If anything, it burns brighter in the darkness, fed by the memory of Owen's arm across my waist and the weight of possibilities I never allowed myself to imagine. I know, with a certainty that both thrills and terrifies me, that there is no going back from this. Whatever comes next, whatever choices I'll be forced to make, whatever consequences I'll have to face, this afternoon has changed everything. I have felt what it means to be held, and I can never again pretend that I don't need it. In the days following that October afternoon, I discover that carrying a secret this large changes the way you move through the world. Every conversation requires careful editing. Every gesture must be measured against the possibility of revealing too much. I find myself studying Clara's face across the dinner table, searching for signs that she's noticed the shift in me, the way I've begun to exist slightly outside the boundaries of our shared life. At first, I think I'm managing the deception successfully. I maintain my routines, ask about her day at the library, make appropriate responses to her stories about difficult patrons and book club drama. But secrets have weight, and this one sits in my chest like something living, something that grows larger each day. I don't acknowledge its existence aloud. Clara notices things. She always has. It's one of the qualities that made her a good librarian and a good mother, this attention to details that others might miss. She begins to watch me with a different kind of attention, not suspicious exactly, but curious in a way that makes me understand how transparent I've become. The way I linger in conversations with Owen longer than necessary. The way my eyes follow him when he moves through our kitchen, our living room. The spaces that have been ours for 18 years but now feel different with his presence in them. The way I've begun to smile at things he says with an intensity that doesn't match the casual nature of his jokes. Owen, for his part, seems to understand that something has shifted between us without needing to discuss it explicitly. Our conversations continue as before, but there's an undercurrent now, an awareness of that afternoon that colors every interaction. When our hands brush reaching for the same coffee cup, when we pass each other in the narrow hallway, when we sit on the back porch in the gathering darkness, there's a charge in the air that wasn't there before. He hasn't napped in my bed again since that Thursday, though not from any decision we've made together. The opportunity simply hasn't presented itself. Clara has been home more in the evenings. The rhythm of our household hasn't created those pockets of time and privacy that allowed for such intimacies. But I find myself hoping for them anyway, checking the clock when she mentions staying late for inventory or book club meetings. 3 weeks passed this way, with me existing in a strange state of suspended animation, aware that something fundamental has changed, but not yet forced to act on that knowledge. I tell myself I can maintain this indefinitely, that I can carry this new understanding of myself without it affecting the life I've built, the people who depend on me. Then Clara destroys this illusion with a single question. It happens on a Sunday evening in early November. Owen has gone to bed early, claiming a headache, though I suspect he simply needed time alone, away from the careful tension that has begun to characterize our household. Clara and I are cleaning up after dinner, moving through the familiar choreography of loading the dishwasher, wiping counters, storing leftovers. She's been quieter than usual all day, and I've been giving her space, assuming it's fatigue or some issue with work that she'll share when she's ready. But as I'm folding the dish towels, she stops what she's doing and looks at me directly, with an expression I haven't seen in years. "Are you happy?" she asks. The question hangs in the air between us, simple and devastating. I freeze with the towel half folded in my hands. The question isn't casual dinner conversation or the kind of routine check-in married couples perform. Her voice has a trembling quality that suggests she already knows part of the answer, or at least suspects that she won't like what she hears. "Of course I'm happy," I say automatically, the response programmed by decades of performance. But something in my voice betrays me. Maybe the slight delay before answering. Maybe the way the words come out too carefully rehearsed. Clara watches my face as I speak, and I can see her cataloging the signs I've been trying to hide. The distraction, the way I've been somewhere else even when I'm sitting right beside her, the strange energy that seems to surround me lately like an electrical field. "With us," she clarifies, and now her voice is barely above a whisper. "Are you happy with us? With this?" She gestures around the kitchen, but I understand that she means more than the room, more than the house. She means the life we've built together, the carefully constructed normalcy that has sheltered us both for nearly 2 decades. I want to lie. Every instinct I've developed over the years tells me to lie, to reassure her, to smooth this moment over with the same practiced comfort I've used to navigate 1,000 other difficult conversations. But something about the way she's looking at me, the raw honesty in her voice, makes deception feel impossible. Instead, I say nothing. The silence stretches between us, growing heavier with each second that passes without the reassurance she's asking for. And in that silence, she reads everything I can't bring myself to say aloud. Her face changes, not dramatically, but in small ways that someone who has lived with her for 18 years learns to recognize. The tightening around her eyes, the way her mouth sets itself into a line that suggests she's trying not to cry. She nods once, a gesture that seems to acknowledge both the question she asked and the answer I didn't give. She doesn't ask about Owen specifically, doesn't demand explanations or accusations. Instead, she finishes loading the dishwasher and goes upstairs without another word, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the weight of what has just passed between us. That night, I don't even attempt sleep. I pace the kitchen until well past midnight, then move to the living room where I sit in my usual chair staring out the window at the street lamps casting circles of light on the empty sidewalk. The house is quiet around me, Clara asleep upstairs, Owen in the guest room, both of them existing in worlds that suddenly feel very far from where I am. The choice I've been avoiding crystallizes with brutal clarity. I can no longer pretend that nothing has changed, that I can continue to exist in this liminal space between my old life and whatever possibility Owen represents. Clara's question has forced me to confront what I've been running from since college, maybe longer. I imagine what it would mean to choose authenticity over safety, to follow this awakening to wherever it leads. A life with Owen, not necessarily immediately, not without complications and conversations and careful navigation of the wreckage my honesty would create, but eventually. A life where I could be held without shame, where I could love without performing, where I could wake up each morning as myself rather than as the carefully constructed version of myself I've been maintaining for decades. The possibility fills me with a kind of terror that's equal parts excitement and grief. To choose this would mean destroying the life Clara and I have built, explaining to my children why their father has suddenly become someone they don't recognize, facing the judgment of neighbors and coworkers, and everyone who has known me as the steady, reliable family man who mows his lawn on Saturdays and never causes drama. But staying means something else, something that might be even worse. It means looking at Clara every day knowing that she knows, that we both understand our marriage is now a performance we're giving for an audience that no longer believes in the reality of what we're portraying. It means watching Owen eventually find an apartment, eventually leave, eventually build a life that doesn't include me while I remain trapped in a house that feels less like home and more like a museum dedicated to someone I used to be. Neither choice is clean. Neither choice is heroic. Both will cause pain to people I care about. Both will require me to become someone I've never been before, either the man who destroyed his family for selfish reasons or the man who sacrificed his own truth to maintain a comfortable lie. As dawn approaches and the street lamps begin to fade against the growing light, I understand that this is not a decision between right and wrong. This is a decision between two different kinds of fracture, two different ways of breaking something that cannot remain whole. The weight of this choice settles into my bones as the sun rises over our quiet neighborhood, illuminating a world that looks exactly the same as it did yesterday, but will never feel the same again. Somewhere upstairs, Clara is probably lying awake too, and in the guest room, Owen sleeps peacefully, unaware that his presence in our house has set in motion a series of events that will change all of our lives in ways none of us can fully predict. I sit in my chair as morning light fills the living room, no closer to an answer than I was at midnight, but finally, terrifyingly clear about the magnitude of what I'm being asked to choose. Owen finds an apartment 3 days later, a one-bedroom in the arts district downtown, above a coffee shop that he says reminds him of places he used to frequent when he was younger and still believed that the right neighborhood could make you into the person you wanted to become. He shows me pictures on his phone, exposed brick walls, tall windows that face east toward the river, hardwood floors that creak in a way that suggests character rather than decay. The rent is more than he should probably pay, but he's tired of temporary situations, tired of living out of suitcases and sleeping on mattresses that belong to other people. He wants his own space again, he tells me, though something in his voice suggests this isn't the whole truth. I suspect he's as aware as I am that the tension in our house has become unbearable, that Clara's careful politeness toward him now carries an edge that wasn't there before. She's been cordial since that night in the kitchen, but cordial in the way people are when they're managing a situation rather than living through it naturally. She still sets a place for him at dinner, still asks about his job search, still makes conversation about the weather and the news. But there's a brittleness to it now, as though she's following a script for how to behave toward a house guest when what she really wants is for everyone to acknowledge that the play is over. I help him pack on a Saturday morning that feels like the end of something much larger than a temporary housing arrangement. His possessions fit into the same 2 suitcases he arrived with, plus the box of books and a few items Clara insisted he take. Leftover pasta sauce, a coffee mug he'd grown attached to, a throw blanket from the living room that she said we never used anyway. The morning is gray and cold, with the kind of November sky that seems to press down on everything beneath it. We load his car without much conversation, just the practical words that accompany any move. Watch the corner on that box. Let me get the door. Do you have everything from upstairs? Clara stays inside, claiming she has housework to catch up on, though I suspect she simply can't face the goodbye. When everything is loaded, Owen stands beside his car for a moment, keys in his hand, looking back at the house where he spent the past 2 months. From the outside, it must look like any other house on any other Saturday morning. Neat lawn, painted shutters, the kind of suburban stability that suggests nothing interesting ever happens behind those walls. We look at each other across the roof of his car, and in that moment, everything that has passed between us seems to hover in the air like something visible. The morning coffee conversations, the evening walks, the shared laughter over movies neither of us will remember, that Thursday afternoon when his arm fell across my waist and changed everything. All of it unspoken, all of it acknowledged in the space between us. He doesn't say goodbye in any conventional sense. Instead, he nods once, a gesture that seems to carry the weight of everything we haven't been able to say aloud. His eyes hold mine for just a moment longer than casual farewell would require, and I see in them the same recognition I carry, that some things can't be undone once they've been experienced, that we have shared something that will outlast his departure. Then he gets in his car and drives away, and I'm left standing in my driveway watching his taillights disappear around the corner where Mrs. Patterson is raking leaves and Mr. Kowalski is washing his car, both of them continuing with their Saturday morning routines as though nothing significant has just occurred. That night, Clara goes to bed early without explanation. The house settles into its familiar evening quiet, but the silence feels different now, not empty, but expectant, waiting for something that hasn't happened yet, but feels inevitable. I sit at the kitchen table where Owen and I shared so many morning conversations, where we talked about architecture and insurance claims and the ways people learn to settle for less than they imagined. The surface is clear now except for a stack of mail I haven't opened and a coffee ring from this morning that I should probably wipe away, but somehow can't bring myself to erase. My wedding ring sits on the counter where I placed it without conscious decision, a circle of gold that has marked my finger for 18 years. I pick it up and turn it slowly between my fingers, feeling its familiar weight, the way it has worn smooth in the places where it rubs against the adjacent fingers. It feels both completely familiar and entirely foreign, like an artifact from someone else's life. I think about the man who first put this ring on, who stood in a church on a June morning in 1987 and promised to love and honor and cherish until death do us part. He meant those promises, believed in them with the conviction that comes from never having questioned the shape your life is supposed to take. He couldn't have imagined sitting in this kitchen 20 years later, holding this ring like evidence of a crime he's not sure he's committed. The house creaks around me, settling into its nighttime rhythms. Upstairs, Clara sleeps in our bed, probably dreaming of library books and community events and the ordinary disappointments of a marriage that died so gradually neither of us noticed when it stopped breathing. In a one-bedroom apartment across town, Owen is probably arranging his books on shelves, making coffee in his own kitchen, beginning the process of building a new life from the pieces of the old one. And I sit here in the space between, no longer the man who could pretend contentment, but not yet the man who knows what comes next. When I finally go upstairs, I lie in bed and reach instinctively for the space where Owen used to nap on those quiet afternoons when the house felt suspended in possibility. My hand finds only empty air, cooler than the warmth of blankets, but I let it linger there anyway, as though I'm touching a ghost or holding onto a memory that's already beginning to fade around the edges. The ceiling fan turns above me in its endless circles, the same rotation it has followed for years, indifferent to the changes happening in the room below. But I'm not watching it anymore with the resignation I used to feel during those sleepless nights when marriage felt like a comfortable prison and I couldn't imagine any other way to live. Now I watch it with something closer to anticipation. I know there is no going back to the life I had before Owen arrived with his 2 suitcases and his gentle questions and his willingness to see me as something more than the roles I've been performing. I haven't chosen fully yet, haven't taken the irreversible steps that will transform possibility into reality. But I have stepped into a truth that cannot be undone. I know now what it feels like to be held, what it means to be seen, what it costs to live authentically, and what it costs to live safely. The choice is still ahead of me, but the choosing has already begun. The ceiling fan turns, and I close my eyes. And for the first time in years, I'm not afraid of what tomorrow might bring.